So you're having a little trouble building relationships with stakeholders in your organization. Join the club. This is something that maybe in this role that you're playing, you've got your stakeholder relationships solid. But let's say you go to another organization or you get promoted and are now in a new role. Building relationships with stakeholders is essential to measuring and evaluating the outcomes of our programs. And if we don't have a solid relationship with stakeholders, that gets a whole heck of a lot more difficult. Now, it's been said that it's all about the money when it comes to winning stakeholders over. And I'm here to tell you it's simply not true. Now, of course, money matters. And as learning professionals, we absolutely need to speak the language of the business. But it's not all about the money. It's about building relationships with the right people. And those right people aren't limited to just business leaders themselves. In this video, our guest, Candace Mitchell, who has been in the learning and development industry as an OG member. She didn't come from somewhere else. She's been in learning and development her entire career, and she's been through it all. And one of the stories that's the most impactful experience in her career is a time when she went from having a completely terrible relationship with stakeholders to the point where they didn't even want her there, all the way to having the most incredible, trusting, collaborative partnership with stakeholders in her organization. And she did that all in 4 to 6 weeks. Do you want that to happen for yourself? This video is going to be the process that Candace used to build relationships with the right people inside and outside of her organization to not only design learning that makes a difference, but to have the kind of relationships that we need to show the value of learning and development. I hope you found yourself in the right video because that is what we're going to dive into right now. So frame for us, Candace, in this case study, which is of course is real example, we're not making this up, this is real from your life and everyone gets to benefit from it. Frame the challenge for us. Where were you? Who were you working with? What was your charge? And just tell us sort of the original relationship you had with stakeholders going into this project.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm so glad we're having this conversation because I hear it so many times where people are just ticking the box and they do not have that consulting relationship with the people. And that's how I started within this case study. So I was employed by the owners of several different companies. And so it was a holding company that then owned some subsidiaries. And that holding company is who employed me. And so I came in thinking that people wanted me there. I was employed by their owners. But then I went in and I met with the senior leadership of that specific company, and they didn't really want me there, which was, hard to learn. And I came in thinking, I've got 10 years of experience. I'm really good at this. I am going to come in. I'm going to, shoot all the lights out, solve all your problems. And really, they didn't truly want me there. They hadn't had learning. I was an expense coming directly out of their bottom line, which they weren't happy about. And they didn't see the value in what I would bring. And so, but the owners brought me in, and so I was there. And so how did I start? The very first conversation, I won't go into the detail yet, but the very first conversation, I got a very clear mandate from them. We need our people to become computer literate so that they can go on and get full-time employment. And that was the brief that I got originally.
Well, it sounds familiar. If you've been on LinkedIn lately, the thing that you just shared is the story of so many of us. We get an order for training and we get what seems to be the solution. And if you're new in the industry and a stakeholder is telling you, our employees or the members of our community need computer skills, it's really hard to challenge and push back on that because whether you're new to the organization or you're new to the field of learning and development, it's easier for us to just go, okay, well, I'm going to trust my stakeholders. They must know
that they've probably already done their research and they've done a needs analysis. They wouldn't be telling me this if they didn't already have good indicators that this is the right solution. And so you were in that boat. You got an order for training and they asked for computer skills. And what's interesting in what you shared is that they asked for computer skills, but they also said, because we want them to get jobs. And you were lucky in that sense, because some of us don't even get, why do computer skills matter? We're just told we want this skill development. How many times have you heard, we want leaders to have new training? Great. We need a leadership training, but we don't get to hear the why that's important. So I'm happy to hear that in this situation, you at least heard from stakeholders why it mattered. So tell us what happened from there.
Yeah, and not necessarily to take credit away from them, but that mattered because they were a bridging company that would get people sort of from a college into their first job. And so that's why it mattered to them. That was their bread and butter. That was where the money came from. And so it wasn't, to do good and get these people jobs. It was, that's part of it, but it was to actually get these people hired so that they can receive some funding. So that was the business case for this. And I'm just going to admit it, what I did wrong in those first couple of stakeholder meetings was I didn't ask questions. I did take the order. I did think that, okay, to get these people employed, they needed computer literacy. That's, after all, the jobs they were going into, some, data collection and things like that. They just needed basic computer literacy and they would get the jobs. Another thing I did wrong was going in, and you alluded to this, but really going in with the mindset of the customer's always right. And I want to point out to your audience here is that it doesn't matter that I was a consultant. Even if you are internal, you're still going in as a consultant, as a business partner, and you should be asking those questions, and you shouldn't go in with an assumption that your customer is always right. And that's what I did wrong right up front.
So now we've got the case study at hand, the challenge in front of Candace. She had a transactional relationship with the leaders in her organization, with the people who were signing her paychecks. And she knew that in order to make her learning and development initiative effective, she needed to have better relationships with stakeholders because they were just as important of a part of the design and development process as she, the expert in learning and development. So, one thing to call attention to is the continuum. So you may have heard this before, that there's this continuum. We, on the one hand, either have a transactional relationship with leaders and stakeholders, or we have a consultative relationship where we are seen as business partners and high-level contributors to organizational and community problems. So we often are going to fall somewhere in between the spectrum, especially as you evolve in your career. Like I said at the beginning of this video, maybe we had a high-level business type relationship with business leaders in one organization or in one role, but in a next role, you could be all the way back at the very beginning of that continuum or that process. So what I suggest is, as soon as you're interviewing or if you're stepping into a role for the first time, try to get a feel for where are you on that continuum. Is your department or is your role historically seen as transactional? Or do you have the privilege of being a leader, a consultative partner to the business to help them solve organizational problems? There are indicators that can help you quickly see where you're at on that spectrum. Those indicators include, do people come to you and ask you to, pick your brain, to share some thoughts, to share ideas and collaborate? Hey, I have this idea. Tell me what you think. Are you the kind of person that's sought out for your ideas and solutions? Or do people come to you and say, hey, Elena, I need you to build this training for me. Can you do it in 2 weeks? And no more conversation is had. That is a really good indicator that you're either in the consultative or you're in the transactional space. And don't worry, we've all been there. If you want to move from a more transactional order taker role to a consultative role, there are a few simple steps you can take. Let's hear how Candace approached her transactional relationship with stakeholders and moved that into a very proud consultative business partnership.
So then I pivoted, and just to let everyone know, I grew up in a company where we were those business partners, and so why I ran with the audit, I'll never know. I didn't actually do anything, but I certainly did take their word for it. But yes, how I pivoted, I went back to them and I asked for time. So I said, can I please spend some time with the audience, the people who will be receiving this training? And can I please spend some time with, they had some internal facilitators who would train these computer literacy skills. And I wanted to know where they were missing the mark. Why were they missing the mark? What was going on there? So I asked for time. Can I spend time with the audience and time with the facilitators? I was granted that time, thank goodness, because if they had said no, they would have got a very subpar solution. Just as simple as that. It wouldn't have achieved any of the business results that they were looking for. So they gave me that time and I spent time. And I literally went into the office and I sat with people. I listened. I just observed. I watched people answering calls. I watched people, being a receptionist. How do they welcome people in? I watched people type an email. I would just sit next to them and watch them, and luckily it was just me. People weren't very uncomfortable because it sounds like they might be like I'm just stalking people, but really, that's what I did. I spent days just observing, making notes, looking, asking some questions. And then I spent time in the classroom. So with the facilitators who trained, the audience, the end recipients of this training, and I sat in on their classrooms and I watched what they were doing and I spoke with them. I, asked them good questions and I gathered all of that information. I then went in and I looked at the data. So the senior leaders gave me their data and I went and I data mined and I matched the numbers with the stories that I was looking at, to really put together a holistic picture of what was going wrong and what could we possibly do about it.
So Candace admitted that she didn't get it right. So what? We all make mistakes. What she did that was fantastic was just said, hey, you know what? Let's take a minute and let's just make sure that we're doing the right thing. And I should have asked you a few questions before going to the drawing board and just building some computer literacy training. I'd like to take some more time. She pivoted. She was vulnerable. She said, hey, I think we could do this better. That goes a long way with stakeholders. Nobody's perfect. And then sometimes we need a little more reflection to come to the realization that, hey, we could be doing this differently. And that is exactly what Candace did. So back to our process of moving from a transactional relationship to a consultative partnership with our stakeholders. Step number one, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to pivot, to take an order for training and say, hey, you know what? I think we could do this a little bit better. Step number two, ask for time. Imagine you're in a meeting with stakeholders and they say, hey, Elena, we think we need some computer literacy training for our learners in this organization. Can you get on that? Instead of saying, well, what makes you think computer literacy training is the right move? Or what data do you have to prove that computer literacy is the right training approach? If I ask those questions, how would you feel? Defensive, right? Asking for time is neutral. Asking for time is just to validate that we're on the right track. Maybe there's something in addition or a certain way we could approach computer literacy skills. So anytime we have a conversation where we want to get more information, try to avoid questions that start with why. Why questions always leave the person on the receiving end feeling defensive. Why did you do this? Why didn't you think about that? Why didn't you take more time? It already feels like a conversation I wouldn't want to be a part of, and that makes everything more difficult. So ask a neutral question, can I have some time? Now, if you get resistance, because I've been told anecdotally, and I've seen some data that suggests that about 50% of us are going to have resistance to this kind of question, really any kind of questioning, to try and find the root cause of business problems to get the right learning solution. If you ask for time and you get resistance, here's the way to approach that. And Candace gives us a few more details.
there are two paths we can take here. We can either do it the right way or the quick way. And to me, my argument is always the quick way is not actually going to get you quicker results. We're going to go down the wrong path quicker to the wrong end destination. I have very seldom, very, very seldom actually come across an order from the business that is completely right. And so it is our duty to push back and say, if we slow down here, we're just slowing down in the very beginning stages, but the end will be quicker. We will get to the end result quicker, and we will build that competence that we need for sustained success. And so I have pushed back many times on that, where, we need training and, can you roll it out in 2 weeks? And, I say it's not give me 2 years, it's give me maybe 4 weeks. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but you absolutely need to carve out that time to do it right in the long run.
So I started this video by saying that it's not all about the money. But in this particular case, leveraging money and financial returns or financial costs associated with not taking time actually is using the language of the business in the right ways to get the time that we need to do a needs analysis and make sure that we're on the right. We are going to waste time, and time equates to dollars, by not doing a needs analysis. And I have some data and a study that you can use down below in the description to use that to your advantage anytime you get resistance in future conversations. Doing upfront work to make sure that we understand the problem and that we get the perspectives of a variety of a few different people on what's the right solution gets us closer to actually having a solution that gives us the business results that we want.
Now, you told me before we hit the record button that you had a couple of stories of different stakeholders and what you had done to build relationships with them. And it sounds like there were some different approaches that you took. Are you able to share with us some of the process that you did to build relationships with those different stakeholders?
Yeah, absolutely. So my stakeholders, and probably everyone can nod in agreement, were the owners that originally hired me for this job and the senior leadership. And so often that's where we stop. We think, okay, the senior leaders, they're going to tell us what to do. We're going to do it. We're going to do it, do the best learning training program that we've ever done, and the senior leaders are going to be happy. But that is definitely not where we stop. I had 3 additional stakeholders that were instrumental to the success. Couldn't have done it without them. The first were the managers, the middle managers, and the team leaders. So the team leaders, some of them were also the audience, but then they would manage a little team of 4 or 5. So they were almost your high performing people who were then given this sort of team leader role. The second most pivotal stakeholders that could have made or broken the solution were those facilitators. So the facilitators, and I'm going to go into a little bit of detail with the facilitators, is that some of them were there doing this program for 20 years. So me coming in and saying, you're not doing your job properly, which I didn't say, but just the fact that I was there told them that they weren't doing their job properly, they got extremely defensive. The one wouldn't even meet with me. They were like, you're here to take my job. I'm not interested. I've been doing this for 20 years. I genuinely care about these people. They matter to me. I'm part of the community, so I had a huge amount of resistance from the facilitators. That was, to me, quite a shock, because here I am coming in to help them, but really, that's not how they saw it. And so that was a huge win for me, and I'll go in to explain that. But the third stakeholders were the learners. So I was hearing things from the senior leaders, even the facilitators. These people don't want to learn. These people don't want to improve their lives. These people just want to be here because they get paid to learn, and they don't really want a real job. They're just going to go in and study another thing. And this person has a bad attitude. They're going to, they're on drugs. A lot of things, like a lot of problems were being said. And through the data mining, I was capturing this, and I had a whole bunch of like just actual sentences that were being said about these learners. And so I thought, okay, let me check. Let me ask them, do you want to be a learner earning minimum wage for the rest of your life, or do you want a job? Do you want to pull yourself out of, these people were really living in poverty. I mean, some of them couldn't afford, transport to get to class. It was really dealing with people who needed it. So I understood the facilitator's passion, and that's where I got them. But yeah, I decided to check, and so I would speak with learners. I would ask them, "What are your dreams? What are your goals? What's holding you back? Why can't you get to class on time? All of this stuff." And through that, they could see that I cared. And through that, the facilitators saw that I cared. I would go into really scary parts of town to be with these people, and that's how I just built up connection with everyone.
So our total list of stakeholders that we want to build relationships with are, of course, leaders in the business, of course, the learner. But the ones that we might have overlooked are, if you are designing curriculum that's being delivered or facilitated by somebody else, those facilitators are important stakeholders too. If you're partnering with subject matter experts who are working with you to give you the right content and the right behaviors and the practice activities to help learners to achieve their goals, those SMEs are just as important as stakeholders. And your managers, the people who supervise your learners or your employees, those people are also incredibly valuable stakeholders. And when we do the work to interview, observe, to work with those different groups of people and get a sense of what is it that is really important to them, if we get their agenda when we interview them in our needs analysis, we can give an incredibly high return on expectations. I know most of us are told that we want to get a return on investment, but actually what could be more important and way more beneficial as a measure of success is, did we deliver on the expectations that we learned about upfront from all of our stakeholder groups? Are you doing that? If you're not, that's a quick way to understand how to deliver a solution that's effective from a variety of different lenses. And those measures matter too. And in some cases, they can also translate to dollars and cents. And whether they do or not, the data on did we deliver on the expectations of our stakeholders tells us as learning and development professionals if we were successful or not. And keeping our stakeholders up to date during the development process and the delivery and afterward around how we're doing to meet their expectations goes a real long way in building those stakeholder relationships. And as you heard from Candace, that only took 8 weeks. And in some cases, it can take even less time. So I hope you have a completely different perspective now on what it takes to build relationships with stakeholders of all levels in your work. It doesn't have to take a long time. And if you don't have any kind of relationship at all, start small. Ask questions. And the first question you should be asking is time. Give a great reason for it. Use the language of the business to support why you need that time, and you might be surprised that you just might get it. Thank you for tuning into this video. I would love to know what takeaways or what things you plan on doing differently after hearing Candace's story and our insights here today. Please use the comment section. Let us know what you're taking away, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, bye-bye.